Okay, we are now recording, so we welcome those who will be watching this a little bit later. A reminder to everybody, if you are not here on class session, but you're going to be watching the recording, it's important that you, when I send it, that you watch it and that you let me know that you watched all of the recordings and which ones you watched so that I can mark you accordingly. So I'd appreciate that, especially to you who live a distance away and will be watching this as a recording, which I'll be sending out in the next few hours here after class. So thank you. Uh, Welcome back after the reading break, and hopefully you were able to use your time wisely. Um, some of the things I did was nothing and a little bit more of nothing. I did some grading and then I did nothing. Then I house cleaned and then I did nothing. I was busy though at the same time. So hopefully you were able to get a few things done and feel ready to go. Here we are now on the last week of Feb, and really we go into March, and March is normally in, if we were meeting together in a classroom, this, and it is anyways, it's um, speaking month, it's speech month. Um, that when we give the speeches, each the informative and the persuasive speech, each take about 3 class sessions, not the way we're doing it now because of COVID-19 and you're recording your speeches. And so 6 and sometimes up to 7 sessions in March are speeches that we're involved in. So that really is not, the way we're able to do it now. And oh dear, I hope my wife gets that. So I apologize for the phone ringing. Call from Nova Dental. So I apologize for that phone ringing. Um, and that's kind of what March is quite a bit alike. A reminder that coming up, you got to look at your syllabus and be aware of what's coming. On the last page of the syllabus, you'll see the schedule, and you'll see that on March 15 is the next speech. That's when it's due. March 15 is the informative speech, and you can check out a little more description about that on page 4 at the bottom of the syllabus. Regarding that, I'll be talking about informative public and persuasive speaking a little bit later in the semester. So be aware kind of where we are in regard to the semester. End comes on us quite quickly from this time onward. March is the longest month of meeting together, and most sessions that we meet together during this time, or at least as far as having class sessions. When we have the speeches, as you know, those 2 speech weeks, on the Monday, your speech is due, and we don't meet on the 15th or the 17th because it's just you get the speeches in, and on the 29th and 31st, the same thing. So just take note of that. Throughout the semester, I have talked about why we should learn to speak publicly, did an introduction to the course, talked about the elements of public speaking, your first speech about speech anxiety, and I'm aware that speech anxiety is actually a big thing for some. And so I have a talk on the 22nd of March called Self-Talk, Helpful or Harmful. I might move that one up to March the 3rd and move what I have on March 3rd down to March 22. There's always so much material to try to cover, and you can only cover so much. So I have to do it in parts as we go along, covering many of the important factors related to public speaking. So we talked about listening, we talked about credibility in speaking, we talked about audience analysis, we talked about selecting the subject and the purpose of the speech. Those are topics we've covered. Everyone's important. Every single topic is important. I mentioned to you that when we talk about the issue of ethos, the perception the audience has of you as a speaker, that I consider that the single most important issue, I still do, the most important topic in public speaking, one that we need to all take seriously. But today we're going to talk about one that I think gets abused, ignored, or is underdeveloped. And a speaker does that at their own peril. I'm very, very big on the importance of this topic, the introduction and the conclusion. There are a lot of people that don't think that's important. Let's just get to the meat of the speech. Well, you know what? You get to the meat of the speech, but you haven't prepared your audience. They're not listening to you anyways.
Sir, can I ask you a question? Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
It's me, Saveline. Did you got my speech evaluation? Because I sent it ago 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Did you receive it per mail? Because you mailed me today in the morning that you didn't receive it.
Saveline, I'm just looking here. I have marked your speech, but I didn't get your but you know, something happened to the your evaluation, but I did get, you sent it back, so I do have it now.
Yeah, but I sent it on time 2 weeks ago, so that's why I just want to make sure it's not a late submission.
Yeah, I know that. It's on time, so no problem.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
So let's get talking about the introduction and the conclusion, which are important areas of public speaking. Here, I'm just putting my notes back. And these are, as I said, are often underdeveloped. And I've done consulting with people who do public speaking, and sometimes they're not listening carefully how important this is. In the evaluation form that I'll be using, which I will be sending out to you eventually, fairly shortly, a little bit, you will see a whole section that I evaluate on the introduction, a whole section I evaluate on the conclusion. There are 5 functions that you need to do in your introduction. There are 4 functions that you need to do in your conclusion. You just don't get up front and say, I've got a speech, now I'll give it. That's not an introduction. And we're going to talk about the 5 functions that are important. You don't come to the end of your material, the end of your body of your speech and say, well, hope you learned something, goodbye. That's not a conclusion. And so we need to understand the functions and of the introduction and the functions of the conclusion to ensure that we do this and do it well. So we're going to look first at the introduction, obviously, it's the first part of a speech. Then we're going to go all the way to the other end and look at it, the conclusion, knowing that it equally is important. So there are 5 functions of an introduction. And when I evaluate you, the next evaluation form that I'll be sending to you, there are 30 factors that I look at. 5 of them are the introduction, 4 of them are the conclusion. Okay, so pay attention and think about this, because literally as I'm listening to you speak, there are 2 things I'm listening for. Do you do the 5 factors for an introduction? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. I'm watching for that in the introduction. And in the conclusion, do you do the 4? Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. I'm looking for those. So the first thing I'm looking for, do you do each one? Secondly, I'm going to be evaluating the quality in which you do each of these areas. They're all important. So I hope you're hearing me say something, and that is that the introduction and the conclusion are important parts of a speech and need to be done well. So let's get looking, first of all, at the introduction, and I'll be expanding my thoughts about each one of these as we look at them. So first I'll just get my, okay, here we are. There are 5 questions really that your audience asks as you stand in front of them. as you're going to begin. The first question is, so what's your gig? What are you about? And in that moment, you need to gain, and then you need to maintain audience attention. By the way, can you see my PowerPoint? Can you see?
Professor, we can only see like gain and maintain audience attention.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay? I'm glad you said that, because all of a sudden it struck me that you're not seeing my PowerPoint. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, we only see like the cover, like the page, introductions and conclusions. That's the only thing we see.
Now, do you see functions of introductions at the top?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm on. Now, do you see gain and maintain audience attention?
Yep.
Okay, great. We're on track. Gain and maintain audience attention is very important. Your first 17 to 21 seconds of a speech are not the most important things you're going to say, but it is the most important time, because it's during that little bit of a time your audience is deciding whether they're going to listen to you. And that is when you begin. You don't complete this first function in that few seconds, but it is when you are doing your part to ensure your audience will stay with you and listen to what you have to say. And you probably know what it's like to have been in a speech where you've been listening and you weren't listening. The person was speaking, but for whatever reason, you were thinking about something else. Well, that's what you're up against when you're in public speaking. You got to gain and then maintain your audience attention. And there are things that you can do to do that. Now, you only have, in your next speech, which is only 7.5 minutes, okay, that is really only 520 seconds roughly that you have. And I already told you that 15 to 20% of a speech should be the introduction. So if you were looking at 520 seconds, that means that you have about 79, 80 seconds, about a minute and a half to do all 5 functions. So you got to be much more brief in what you use because you don't have a longer speech. The first thing you do is gain our attention. Well, how can you do that? Here are some things you can do. You could use people or objects. I had a student give a speech where she actually did this, and it had done very well, very quickly. She had a young man walk in to the room, and she mentioned to us that she was involved in clothes design. That was her career direction for men. And this man walked in wearing clothes she had made for him, and he wore them, and he walked out of the room. He walked around, walked in a circle like a model does, and he walked out. A little later, he came back in with a different set of clothes, and partway through the speech, it fit. But she used a person. It was very, very quick. It didn't take long. Audience participation is another great way to do it. If you're in a live audience and you want to know how many of you have ever attended university, please put your hands up. Well, then everybody who go to university or went to university, put up their hand, you would see that. Or how many have you ever considered getting married? Or whatever it happens to be, audience participation. It could even be this. You could simply say to your audience, please turn to a neighbor and in the next 15 seconds, tell them your favorite color. Next 10 seconds, what's your favorite color? And everybody buzz, 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 buzz. And then you say, okay, I want to hear 5 people tell me what their favorite color, and the people yell the color, okay? When you do that, people are saying, well, you got their brain involved. Well, what's these questions all about? And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get their attention. But it's got to relate to the speech. You can dress for the topic or the occasion. In the United States, when I taught at Oregon State University, when I was working on my doctoral degree, I had a student come in dressed in what is called Uncle Sam outfit. Uncle Sam Uncle starts with U, Sam starts with S, US, United States. And there's this fictitious person who wears a white beard, is dressed in red, white, and blue colors with stars and stripes. And he came dressed for the occasion to speak on the American, being an American. And I was teaching in Oregon, which is one of the states in the United States. He dressed for the occasion. You can use imagination. Can you imagine? And you start off that way. Now you can't, if you're having a short speech, like 7 minutes, you can only use a very tiny little imaginative thing. But I was speaking once and I used the imagination of the people. What would it be like if the Queen of England had asked to come and have a meal at your home, and her husband and one of their sons and daughter-in-laws and a couple of grandchildren? And then what would it be like with the whole world watching with TV cameras outside? They couldn't see inside your house, but inside your house, after the meal, the Queen suddenly stood up and said, "Please pass all the dirty dishes here. My husband and I are going to go scrape the dishes and put the dishes in the dirty, the dishwasher for you." Of course, you would say, "No, no, no, you're the Queen." And she says, "Nope, I'm doing it." And I go on and I describe it further. And then I say, "Okay, now I want you to listen to this reading." And I read, it's from the Bible, talks about Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. And I say, which is crazier? Which is more ludicrous? Which is more impossible? I used the people's imagination, but I had a longer time, so I could do more than 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 seconds. Use an audio equipment is a great way to gain audience attention. I had a student at Oregon State University. He came into the room early and he set up a sound system. And when we came in and it was his turn to speak, he turned the sound system on and there was rock and roll music. And it was just short little clips of different songs, okay, from the history of rock and roll. That was his focus on the history and the development of rock and roll music from the 50s, the 1960s, and the 1970s, and the 1980s. And that's actually where when I was going to Oregon State University. And he used it well. All the windows were wide open, so I think everybody in the university got to hear his music, which was fun to listen to. You can arouse suspense. Now, there was a student I had in one of my classes at Oregon State University who aroused suspense, but she connected it to another function that I'll speak about a little bit later called self-disclosure. So I'll come back to what she did, but you could arouse suspense. Another thing that you can do along with arousing suspense is play a role. I had some students come both dressed and then they played the role of a Shakespearean person in one of his plays. And it was quite effective. Another one is to use slides or film. Now, you don't have a long time in your speech, so to use a slide or film could be pretty difficult to do. But you might have a picture, and I've had students who talked about their hometown, and they wanted us to see a picture of what it looked like. It was very effective. So that's something you could do, but obviously you got to keep thinking about time. Some of these you can't do in the short speeches that you have. Using a quote. Now, this is a great one to use for a short speech of 7 minutes. You might have a quote, a famous quote from a former president of the United States who was assassinated, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but rather ask what you can do for your country." How long did that take for me to quote? Say, seconds. But it was effective. Now, he used the quote, he used the point of the quote in his speech. So the quote has to have a connection to the speech itself, but it can be very effective. And you might be saying, well, where do I get quotes? You can Google them. Just let's say you're going to be speaking on quotes about marriage or about dating. Then just type in quotes about dating, something of that nature, and you will likely find all sorts of quotes, and find one that makes sense and fits with what you're saying. One of my favorite old quotes that I read once and I've never forgotten was, simplicity taken to the extreme is elegance. In other words, doing something in its simplicity can come across as being very elegant. I've done weddings. I've had brides dressed up like you wouldn't believe the money they must have spent for the dress, etc. And it didn't come across really appealing. I remember officiating at a wedding, and the couple were not well-to-do, but the dress she wore, which was so simple, was incredibly elegant. And so simplicity taken to the extreme is a great quote. That's, one of my favorites. But using a quote takes but seconds. Okay, how long does this take? Simplicity taken to the extreme is elegant. That didn't even take me 10 seconds. Now, I could then expand a little bit and explain what I mean by that. But a quote's powerful. Utilizing striking facts or statistics can be very, very effective. Years ago, I was making a presentation on the Trinity campus. I was part of an organization called Smarter Families Canada. And one of the big things that we promoted was healthy marriages. And I was asked, because I had developed a significant program in the area of preparing for marriage. It was for couples who are going to get married. And it involved connecting these young couples to mentoring couples. So 2 or 3 couples who wanted to get married would come together with one couple who have been married for 10 to 20 years or so. And they would use wisdom talking through important things. There was a workbook, etc., that was used. Well, it was a very powerful. We had at that organization, I had about close to 60 weddings a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. Pretty well one wedding every weekend, sort of thing. And I wanted the couples to be connected with a mentoring couple. And so, like I said, 2 or 3 couples who were going to get married would meet together with one couple who had been married a long time, and they had a workbook to work through, etc. And they had to agree to be together for no less than 6 to 9 months before the wedding. And then they had to agree to meet once every 2 months for 24 months, meaning that they would meet about 10 times a year over the following 10 months. And because the research shows that if you have that, the success rate of a marriage skyrockets. And so when I was doing this seminar, teaching other people about doing this, I had the room filled. I shared a very striking fact with them that comes out of material I'd read, and then the facts I could prove with StatsCan. It's Statistics Canada. And it was the fact that back then it was predicted that soon Canada would come to a point where for every 2 weddings that took place in a year, 1 divorce would happen. So a 2-to-1 ratio. And we saw what happened is that we didn't quite get to the 2-to-1. We were moving in that direction. For every 1 wedding, a half a divorce took place, which is 2-to-1. But in Canada, we got to, for every 1 marriage that took place, 49.7% of a marriage fell apart, meaning we're almost at the 2-to-1. And that was a startling fact for people who were involved in marriage counseling and involved in thinking through how to help couples have successful marriages. Self-disclosure is another function that you could use on the introduction that really can be effective. For instance, I told you about a gal who shared something, and she actually, in sharing this, she was also arousing suspense. She told the story of a young woman who was working and worked a little later and now had to rush home, but didn't have a car. She had to walk home. And to save time, she went down a dark alley to cut through streets. Except she did not know that there was a sexual predator waiting, and he jumped her and he raped her. And she shared this story without saying it was her. And then as it got towards the end of the story, she said, I am that woman. It was self-disclosure. And we were all sitting there like, she has our attention. She's done a very good job. Somebody who's gone through something horrific like that will have the attention of the audience, and she had our attention. Powerful self-disclosure, and it helped a great deal. Storytelling is another powerful way to gain people's imagination. Remember, you only can do a short little speech, short little story in your introduction, because this is just the first of the 5 things you have to do in the introduction. And telling a story is powerful. Now, I had mentioned to you that I once had to speak to an audience that were basically somewhat hostile to my particular philosophy of life. There were 5 organizations that came together to do a Saturday workshop day on early childhood education. And so a keynote speaker was going to be a part of that. And 4 of the organizations wanted somebody else who lived in the eastern part of the United States, and the other wanted me. And so they agreed that if the person in the States couldn't come, they would go with me. Well, the person in the States could not come, so they went with me. I was told that probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the audience were in disagreement with my philosophy of life. And I had to stand in front of that audience. Okay, now I had 50 to 55 minutes to speak, not 7. So I had more time. When I went on stage, I did not say to the people, my name is Curtis. I was already introduced. I did not tell them what I did. That was part of my introduction. People had a brochure on me. They didn't need to have that. When you give your next speech, do not say, hi, my name's Harry. I'm here to talk to you about. That's not to be a part of an introduction. You don't need that. That's a waste of time and space. Go right into your speech. Start with that quote. Start with that self-disclosure. Start with that striking facts that you might, whatever it is you're using. When I went up front of that audience, I was barely getting behind the podium, which took me seconds to put down my book and I started talking. I had a lapel mic on. I went right into a story. I didn't say, hi, my name's Curtis. I teach at this institution. I didn't do any of that. Didn't need to. I went right into my speech. I went right into my story that I was using. I used a story. It was a powerful story. In fact, because I had about 55 minutes total to speak, I easily had, if you take 20% of an hour, I didn't quite have that. I meant I had about 10 minutes or so for my introduction. I spent more time, about a good part of 5 minutes on that story. I could afford to do that. I went right into the story. It caught them off guard. They were not expecting that. And I told the story, true story, entitled Cipher in the Snow, about a little boy who died while on a school bus. When the school bus pulled over, the bus driver thinking he was going to be sick, and the little boy stood on the one step looking at the snow, and then he fell face first into the snow. And the bus driver called for emergency people, and they came and got him and took him to the hospital, but he had passed away. He died. And they're trying to figure out, why would a healthy young boy die? They did an autopsy, nothing wrong with him. Finally, a teacher decided to try to figure out what was going on in his life. And here's what he found out. He found out that his mother and father had separated. The father decided he wanted to be married to another woman. And the mother was responsible now for herself and that boy. And then that mother was financially hardly making ends meet, and she became involved with another man. He moved in. He didn't like her boy. And he began to do a psychological separation of the boy from the mother. The boy was literally losing his mother while living with her. The boy lost his father. Now the boy's losing his mother. He becomes despondent. He quits doing things at school, like studying, doing his homework. Nothing makes sense anymore. The teachers try to help, but they got so many students and this boy's not responding. So they can't spend time with him. His friends are not spending time with him because he's not responding to their friendship. He's now totally by himself. And on that fateful day on the school bus, when the bus driver pulled over, the boy literally willed himself to die. Powerful story, impacting. My audience, mostly women, because they are the ones that work with early childhood. Most of them are got tears in their eyes. It's a sad story. But I've got my audience with me. Man, I have them with me. They're hostile towards me, but now they're so engrossed in my story, I can move on to the second part of this, of the introduction. And I now have to relate the topic to the audience. That wasn't hard that day. That audience, all of them were early childhood educators. And so I was able to point out that that's what they were doing, that children are important, that they had an important job, that they needed to help not have their children die of broken hearts. The teachers are listening and they're shaking their heads in agreement with what I'm saying to them. It ensures the relating the topic to the audience and assures the audience that there is a connection between them and the topic. That's important. The second question your audience is asking, what's this got to do with me? You have to answer that question. And you do that by relating the topic to your audience, helping them see this is important for them. You need to state the topic in the audience's terms. I spoke about the fact that they were teachers, that they worked with little children, that you cared about these children, that you loved these children, that you wanted to impact the children. Everything I was saying was stating it in their terms. The ideas in gaining and maintaining audience attention can lead to relating the topic to your audience, and that's really important. Relating the topic to your audience. They saw, we are teachers with early childhood. This topic, that story connects with the children we relate with. And so it's important for us to pay attention to what they have to say. So the third function, the first function, gain and maintain the audience's attention. Second function, relate the topic to the audience. The third function, relate the topic to yourself to establish the right to speak. Your audience, now the question they're asking after they say, what's your gig? Now they're asking, so what's this got to do with me? The third question is, so what right do you have to talk on this, about this? And you need to demonstrate that you have a right to talk on this important topic to them, that this is critical for them. You have to earn the right to speak. Never assume, ever assume, just because everybody knows you, they know about you, that you do not have to relate the topic to yourself. That's just not true. You have to do that. If you were a medical doctor and you're a heart surgeon and you're talking to a room full of people about heart surgery, you still need to relate the topic to yourself. You need to say to your audience, I, like you, have a heart. I too, like you, want my heart to be healthy. I want as much life as I can possibly get. For that to happen, I, like you, have to take care of my heart by exercise, by diet, by proper diet, by lowering stress where it's at all possible. You need to relate the topic then to yourself by stating that. You need to establish the right to speak. Okay, when I started this course, I shared with you that this is my 39th year of teaching public speaking. I teach other courses too. That this is my 31st year at Trinity Western that I'm now completing right now, and we'll complete it in just the next couple of months. I have a Doctor of Education. I have a Master of Arts, and in both cases, I minored in communication as part of my total educational experience. I shared all that. I shared the fact that I've taught thousands of students. Why? I am establishing my right to teach this course. When you speak, you need to establish the right to speak on a topic. You may say, I'm really passionately interested in hiking. I love going hiking. That's important to me. Then establish the right. You can say, I probably go for hikes, serious hikes, about 15 times a year where I'm gone for a day or longer, whatever it is. I always know the importance of taking the right equipment. I have this, I have that. I've actually taken a couple of courses on hiking so that I can keep my health and keep myself safe. I have read a book on this. I realized how important it is. I actually took a course on this. See, every time you do that sort of stuff, you add to your right to speak on the topic. That's important. You need to establish the right to speak on the topic, whatever the topic is. If you're speaking on it, whether it's you've read a book on it, taken a course in it, or both, whatever it is, you need to establish the right to speak on the topic. You can't just say, I have the right to speak on the topic. That does not establish the right. Why? How do you have the right to speak on the topic? You need to establish that. That's critical. You must establish the right to speak on the topic, and each speech you give. Never assume people know. It enhances your ethos, the issue of credibility, perception with the audience. I told you that I believe that's the single most important issue, is the issue of ethos, the issue of credibility, the issue of perception the audience has of you. That is the most important. If it's not good, you're going to have trouble in your speech. If it's strong, it's going to aid in you being effective in impacting people's lives. Here's some principles for source credibility, the issue of perception, audience, or ethos. One, a high credibility speaker will achieve more opinion change from an audience. So if you're perceived well by your audience, there's more likelihood that they'll consider making changes in their lives. If you're not, less likely that change will take place. The status of the speaker can make a difference in source credibility. Are you a father speaking about being a father? Are you a mother who's given birth to a child? Are you a medical doctor that does operations? Whatever it is, are you a professional in sports? And so you can speak from that perspective about that particular topic. You need to understand your status is very, very important to an audience. Like I think I shared with you, if I brought two men by the last name Green, one was Mr. Green. He read lots of books on heart surgery. And then I brought in Dr. Green. He does heart surgery. Who has more credibility? Dr. Green. Dr. Green because he has a doctorate. Dr. Green because he does surgery on the heart. Poor organization of a speech lowers credibility. If you're not well organized, you lower your credibility. If you're well organized, it doesn't mean you have higher credibility. It means people don't notice in the same way. What people most notice are the negative things. You come walking into a dirty house, you notice it. You walk into a nice clean house, prim and proper, you relax. You probably don't necessarily overly notice how clean it is, but you sure notice if it's messy or dirty. Good delivery can certainly improve your credibility. Therefore, learning all those things that we will be talking about and have talked about that some of you have highlighted as areas to be working on. Good delivery, it can help your credibility. Speaking smoothly, not having filler words, having a voice that shows interest can impact an audience. So you must gain and maintain audience attention. You must relate the topic to yourself, the speaker. excuse me, must relate the topic to your audience. Then you must relate the topic to yourself as a speaker to establish the right to speak. Then fourthly, it is the thesis. The thesis deals with the big idea of the speech. What is the big idea of your speech? What is the focus of your speech? What you're really trying to get at? These are really important issues when you're speaking to your audience. What is the big idea? Last week, or I mean, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the purpose of the speech. Every speech you should have with clarity in a single statement or two statements, the purpose of the speech. If you don't have it, it shows. You see, the more focused your speech is, the more you're able to think through, develop, and speak on. But when you try to cover the whole world, you cover nothing. When you try to cover one little small precise area, you cover a lot more. If you ever choose to do doctoral studies, you will learn that the world is wide. And what you need to do in research is come to a very narrow thing called the question, the issue, the problem statement, and focus on that. And when you go into that area, narrow area, and it broadens into a whole new field of study. Well, the big idea is that getting that narrow idea, because in the midst of that, then it opens up the doors to what's focused on the big idea. It is critical for the audience to understand the purpose of the speech. It is absolutely critical that the audience knows the big idea, because then they can understand the purpose of the speech. And that's critical. So you want to make sure that your speech is concise, is precise, that you know what your purpose of the speech is. This thesis helps shape the direction of the speech. So you can't cover everything. And in a 7.5 minute speech, you certainly can't. So you have to have a concise thesis to help shape the direction of the speech. So you could say, oh, I'm going to talk about heart surgery. I mean, I could, right? Because I've been there. So much about heart surgery. What am I going to speak on? Am I going to speak on the importance of it? Am I going to speak on going through it? Am I going to speak on learning from it? What's the focus? And there's so many parts that get involved. Who's really involved in heart surgery? How many people are in the operating room? How long does it take to recover? You can't cover all of that in one 7-minute speech. So you have to keep it very, very narrow. Maybe you want to talk about recovery from the heart surgery. And so what I would I would develop this introduction, which would incorporate my short story of having that happen to me, where I had to have a valve replacement, which is right in the middle of my chest, right up in the top here. And I would focus in on after the operation, what goes on. Well, first there's just plain recovery. And it's after clearing your head from all the stuff they put into you to put you to sleep. Then you begin to need to start walking real slowly. And then a little bit more and more and more. When I was in the hospital, within 24 hours of the operation, I was walking the ward. It was a square shape, and I would walk around the ward, just walk around the ward. It's a good thing to do. Just slowly, not fast, being careful, because my chest had been sawed in half right here. And then they had used, forget the name of the material, to tie it together again and to let it recover. But during that time, I would walk around very slowly around the square shaped part of where the hospital had its heart surgery patients. So my point is this: you need to focus in shaping the direction of the speech. I'm not going to talk about heart surgery in the broad way. I'm going to talk about recovering from heart surgery. But not only that, I'm going to talk about just the first week of recovery. See, I got to keep getting it narrow, whatever it is I'm going to talk on. The thesis needs to help you do that. You can't cover the whole world. Don't try. Don't think, oh, I'm going to speak on being persistent. Okay, it's a big field. What are you going to talk about on that? You got to get it narrow. Without a thesis, the speaker can quickly lose the interest of the audience. It's very true. If you're going all over the place, the audience can very, very quickly lose interest in regard to kind of what where you're going. So be aware that you cannot do that. A thesis can most often be stated in one of the two statements. So think it through. You can say something like, the purpose of this speech is to teach you the 3 most important colors that impact your life in a positive way, or whatever the topic is. Make it concise, firm. There's one more function of the, I'm just trying to get my computer here, deciding whether it wants to work or not. There we are. Don't ask me why. Oh, what happened? I have no idea what just took place. Let's give me a sec here. Okay, it's okay. We're going to start share screen again. Get back. Okay, come on. I have no idea what happened, people. I'm going to get back into the introduction here. I have no idea why my computer decided to kick out on me. Oh, come on. You gotta be kidding me. Okay. Okay, just give me a sec here. See, where is that? Okay, now. Okay, so anyways,
Sorry, Professor.
Yeah.
We cannot see the PowerPoint.
Okay, I don't know why. Just give me a sec here. I'll just see if I can figure out why. This is silly that this all of a sudden just shut down on me. Okay, let's just try this. Is that better? Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. I have no idea why my computer decided to play this little game with me. Forecasting the organization is the last part of the speech. Okay, I'm just looking here. Okay, we dealt with that, and just some reason my computer decides it wants to act up. Okay, the thesis. Okay, helps to shape without a thesis. Okay, there we are. Now my computer deciding again. The thesis. We dealt that. There, forecasting the organization. There we are. It's the last part of the introduction. It helps shape the expectations the audience has of how long and the direction the speech are going to be given, how long it will take. It reveals when and what the speaker is going to cover in the speech. Sorry about, I have no idea why my computer decided to play games with me. The 5 functions of an introduction: gain and maintain audience attention, relate the speech to your audience, establish the right to speak on the topic by relating the topic to yourself, the speaker. give the thesis of the speech, and forecast the organization. Those are the 5 things. Audience are asking, first, what's your gig? Second, what's this got to do with me? Third, what's this got to do with you? What right do you have to talk on this? Fourth, what is the speech really about? And number 5, how long will the speech with? What's the direction of this speech? Those are the 5 key areas that you want to work with in helping an audience understand the direction the speech is going. Okay, the introduction is critical. Those 5 areas are absolutely necessary. I'll be watching for them in your next speech, but they're also the conclusion of a speech. And there are 4 functions to a conclusion that we need to look at real briefly. The first one, just gonna get all this down here so I know it's there. The first one is the brake light. The brake light. When you're coming to a close of a conversation with somebody, often you have a sense that we're about to end the conversation. There are certain things that happen and you can tell. It's true in a speech, or it should be true in a speech. You need, as the speaker, to give your audience an indication that we're coming to the end of the speech. For instance, the brake light is the indication that the speaker is concluding their speech. And you can do a very uncreative one. You can say, in conclusion. It's not creative, but it works. You can be more creative by saying, as you can see through this speech, we have considered the 3 most important colors that impact humanity. And those colors are. People then know, oh, we're in the conclusion. The speech is coming to a close. So there are various ways you can do it. Phraseology, physicality, tone of voice. Phraseology, in conclusion, or let me sum this up real briefly with you. Audiences know this is a conclusion. Or physically, as you start stepping away from the podium, your voice and tone changes in those moments as you are coming to a close. In the conclusion, the speaker must not add new material. So whatever you do in the conclusion, what you're really trying to do is to bring the brake light that tells the audience we're concluding. And then you do not suddenly say, oh, wait a minute, I want to add one more thing in the body of the speech that I meant to talk about. At that point, you've lost your audience. Once they know you're in the conclusion, you are bringing the speech to a close. Do not add new material. It would frustrate your audience. They will not trust you. Think about it. You are flying, let's just say you're flying into Vancouver on a jetliner. And you've been high in the air, and slowly you can feel the engines pulling back as you're slowly coming down. And now you begin to see closer buildings getting closer and closer. And as you come into the the airport with the runway straight ahead, the buildings are now, in some cases, if you're nearby, taller than what you are right now. You're flying in, you can see how fast you're moving now towards the runway. And at that point, you know, you've been told to put your seatbelt on and you're ready to land. What would you think if all of a sudden all the power of the engines went to full throttle? What would you think if all of a sudden your plane started to shudder and started to move upward again, started to climb? What would you think is going on? I would be nervous. I would be scared that maybe there was another airplane nearby and the plane was trying to get out of the way. But the pilot decided, oh, I think I'm going to go around the city of Vancouver one more time so that people can get another look at the city. I would not be a happy camper. I would not be happy for the pilot to do that. When you're in a speech and you have said in conclusion, or you've said that thing that makes it clear this is the conclusion, you don't all of a sudden decide that, oh, I'm going to bring in some more material. I think I forgot about that. I think I better add it now. Your audience are thinking about landing the plane. They're not thinking about you taking another flight around on information. When you have made it clear that you are in the conclusion, land the speech. Don't take off with new information. The second function is the instant replay. The instant replay really has the idea of restating the thesis, the big idea. In the speech, the intent was to help you understand the three critical colors that help mankind have a better sense of life, if that were the big idea. It also would involve the major points that you want to bring up. So the major points are those three colors that we spoke about are red and blue and green. I have no idea if that's the case. I'm just using that as an example. And that's a quick review. All of a sudden people say, oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes, these three colors are critical. Oh, yes, red, white, red, blue, and green, or whatever colors those happen to be. Very short, to the point. By the way, your conclusion only takes about 10 to maximum 15% of the total speech time. So in a 520-second speech, you've got maybe 50 seconds to 52, 1 minute. The third function of the conclusion is to state the immediate desired results. To state the immediate desired results. This will involve the cognitive, the affective, and the behavioral domains of life. See, when you speak, it's not about you, it's about your audience. When you speak, it's about your audience. You want to impact them. And so you're trying to help them, whether it is for them to remember something, to value something, or to do something about the material that you have just presented to them. That's what's important. So the cognitive, the affective, the behavioral domains of life are important here. The cognitive deals with the issue of to know. To know. I want you to remember. I want you to know this and remember this and think about this. That's the cognitive domain of the brain at work, and that's what you're calling your audience to do. You could go on to the affective domain. I don't want you just to know, but I want you to value and to accept as an important part of your life, these thoughts. The behavioral, I want you not only to know, not only to value, but I also want you to apply, to respond, to react to what's really important here. So I want you to be able to think that through carefully. Good speakers are not just interested in speaking, but rather helping the audience change. Therefore, good speakers understand that it is about the audience and not themselves. When you are speaking, it is about your audience. See, you want to make a difference in the life of your audience. You're not giving a speech to just give a speech. You're giving a speech to make a difference. Whether it is expanding knowledge, whether it is improving the values in light of the knowledge, or whether you want them to have a different lifestyle, to have a different behavioral response or reaction to the material presented. So please never forget this. As a speaker, when you're speaking, you are a servant leader. You are serving your listeners. You're impacting their lives in a significant way. The last function of the conclusion is to end in an upbeat manner. To end in an upbeat manner. End the speech in an upbeat manner. Be careful not to let your voice trail off at that point. Don't become over dramatic. A good speaker wants the people to remember, value, and act upon the speech. Therefore, it is important to be appealing as the speech is brought to a close. It's really important that you remember to end in an upbeat manner. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. If I were speaking at a funeral, how do you end in an upbeat manner? It's a sad occasion. Yes, of course, it's a sad occasion. You don't get up there and say, well, Mary Lou is gone. Now we'll have to continue on. That's not an upbeat manner. You don't want to say, well, we're all glad Bob's gone. Now let's live life. That's actually disrespectful. What's an upbeat manner? Might be saying something like this. All of us have been impacted by Mary's life. She made a difference in the lives of people, made a difference in my life. And now as I move forward, I challenge you like myself to think about the principles that Mary lived by and choose to live by them too, so that we make our world a better place for generations who come behind us. That's an upbeat manner. So whatever your speech is, end in an upbeat manner. It's really, really critical. So now, I've got just a couple minutes here. I'm going to give you a quick test. I'm not going to specifically, unless I have to, actually I'm getting your names out here. So I know who's here. I know there are students who are not here because they're going to be watching this and then filling in. Again, if you had to use a talk from the past that you've watched, you need to let me know that you've watched it so I mark you in attendance. I say that to you attending because you're usually here, but then to all my other students, when you get these, you need to write me and tell me you've got them. So I mark you down accordingly. Now, quick review. We got people who can only listen here. What is the very first function of an introduction? Before I start asking people, I'm just going to ask you, who will tell us what's the first function of an introduction?
Gain and maintain audience attention.
Exactly, Amanda. It's gaining and maintaining audience attention. Absolutely critical. You only have that 17 to 21 seconds to at least begin to gain, and then you want to hold their attention. It's a critical time. And so it's important to understand, and I will be watching you as you speak to see the quality of which you try to gain my attention. Number two, what's the second function of the introduction? Somebody else.
Relate the topic to the audience.
Okay, relating the topic to your audience. You see, the audience is saying, so what's this got to do with me? If it has nothing to do for the audience or they don't see it, they don't have buy-in. If they don't have buy-in, they're not listening. They may have to sit there, but they'll think about other stuff. I know what it's like to pull my phone out and start checking messages or start checking Google on my phone for something. When somebody's speaking, I'm not listening to them. You have to do your part to do everything you can to ensure your audience is listening to you. So it's important that you do that. Okay, let's just checking something here as I'm speaking. Thank you, Sabine. Okay, what is the third function of the introduction?
It's to relate the topic to yourself, and we have to establish the right to speak in that manner. Okay,
that's really an important one, is being able now to understand that you have to demonstrate you have the right to talk on this topic that you are sharing. That's really very important for your audience to know you have the right. If you don't have the right, if you don't establish the right, audience is less likely going to be paying attention to what you have to say. So please understand you have to establish the right to speak on that. Okay, somebody else. What is the fourth function of the introduction? What's the fourth function of the introduction?
The thesis.
It's a thesis. It's the central idea. What is the focus of this speech that I'm speaking on? You need to be able to do that with your audience. Very important for them to say, this is the focus. That's one of the most important things to understand. You have to get down is understanding what the focus is. Okay, and that's critical. Okay, what is the fifth last function of the introduction? What's the last function of the introduction? The last thing you have to do. Somebody?
It's to forecast the organization. Like it's the last part of the introduction.
Right.
So you have to forecast the organization.
Right. Because your audience are saying, where's the speech going? I mean, how do you forecast organization? You can simply say, you know, in this speech, as we consider the importance of the colors that really impact our lives, we're going to look at the 3 most important colors. Okay, people say, oh, 3 colors. That's what they're looking for in the body of the speech. Whatever it is you're speaking on, helping them understand that is absolutely critical. Okay, now I talked about that. Let's talk about the, that's the introduction. Let's talk real quickly about the conclusion. I talked about 4 functions of a conclusion. What are those? Somebody else that hasn't answered before I pull out, I have the question, I have your names here, so I could ask you, what's the first function that I spoke about in the conclusion? What's the 4th function? Somebody, what is the 4th function?
First one is brake light.
Okay, the brake light.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the brake light. It's letting your audience know that you're coming to the close of the speech, okay? And that's exactly what it is. It's letting the audience know you're coming to the close. And there it is right there, the brake light. What is the second function?
The instant replay, in which the speaker brings out with the thesis statement the big idea or the big purpose he wants to talk about.
Right. Or that he or she spoke about, right? That's exactly what it is. Okay, so you got through that one. What's the third function? What is the third function of the conclusion? Brake light. Okay, you're right. It was the brake light. Then the second function was the instant replay.
Third one is bringing cognitive, affective, and behavioral skills into the speech.
Right. It's stating the immediate desired results that you're looking for in the realm of cognitive, affective, behavioral. So what is it you want from your audience for this? Okay, the last function of the conclusion is
to end the speech in an upbeat manner.
Yeah, it's ending the speech in a positive way. Okay, it's not that everything's positive. No, in a funeral, it's not positive, but you can make it positive by saying we can all learn from this person's life and live a life well because of that. So the introduction and the conclusion of a speech are really critical. When you do your speeches for March, and you'll be getting my evaluation form to look over before then, make sure you understand I will be watching those areas related to the functions of the introduction and the functions of the conclusion, because those are very important parts to an effective speech. Listen, it's time to let you go. It's time for me to stop, to pause the recording.